My name is Ethan. This happened to me sometime around 2019 when I was still in my second year of college. Even now, I can still remember almost every detail vividly, although honestly, there are parts of it I wish I could completely forget just to ease my mind. Back then, I was living with an American friend named Ryan. He was an exchange student in the same media communications class as me. Ryan was the kind of guy who was always smiling, always joking around. He loved filming random vlogs, taking pointless photos, and absolutely did not believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. I wasn't superstitious either. At least, not before that happened. That year, the dorms were completely full, so Ryan and I had to rent a small house in an old neighborhood near campus. Calling it a small house wasn't exactly accurate though. It was more like a 2-story wooden home. There was a porch in the front, a grassy backyard, and old houses owned by elderly people all around us. The landlord was a man in his 60s named Mr. Collins. He told us the house used to belong to his sister, but she had moved to another state to live with her children. The place had been sitting empty for almost a year, so he was renting it out cheaply. And it really was cheap. Cheap enough that while signing the lease, I leaned toward Ryan and asked, "Dude, what if there's something wrong with this house?" He laughed. "If there is, even better. I'll get some great content out of it." At the time, I laughed too. The house looked old from the outside, but the inside was surprisingly clean. The first floor had a living room, a kitchen, and a small bathroom. Upstairs, there were 2 bedrooms and a storage room at the very end of the hallway. On the very first day we moved in, Mr. Collins told us something strange. He pointed at the room at the end of the upstairs hallway and said, "You boys won't need that room. It's just full of old stuff. Just keep it locked." I asked, "Do you want us to clean it out?" He shook his head almost immediately. "No, leave everything exactly as it is." At the time, I assumed it was just family belongings he didn't want tenants touching. Nothing unusual. For the first 2 weeks, everything was perfectly fine. Ryan and I went to class during the day, cooked dinner at night, worked on assignments, and sometimes blasted music loud enough for the neighbors to knock on the door and complain. Even though the house was old, it felt comfortable. At night, the wind whistled through the cracks in the wooden walls, but after a few days, you got used to it. Then one night, I started hearing noises coming from the room at the end of the hallway. It was a little after 2 a.m. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone when I heard a soft sound. Click, like fingernails tapping against wood. I lifted my head and listened carefully. Nothing. I figured it was just the house settling from the cold. In old wooden houses like this, that was normal. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. Click, click, click. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced apart. I sat up immediately. The sound was coming from the end of the hallway, from the locked storage room. I opened my bedroom door and looked outside. The hallway was pitch black except for a faint glow from Ryan's nightlight leaking through the crack under his door. I stood there listening for a while longer. Nothing else. The next morning, I told Ryan about it. He laughed while eating cereal. Probably just rats. I thought so too, until the following night. This time, it wasn't just knocking. It sounded like someone dragging something across the floor inside the room. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like a wooden chair being slowly pulled across hardwood. I lay completely still in bed, listening carefully. The feeling was horrible, because you knew there were only 2 people in the house. You knew that room was locked, and yet there were noises coming from inside it. I texted Ryan, "Dude, do you hear that?" He replied almost instantly, "Yeah." A moment later, another message appeared. "Don't go outside." I remember staring at that message for a long time, because Ryan was not the type to get scared by things like this. After about 10 minutes, the dragging sound stopped. Then came knocking. Knock, knock, knock. 3 times. This time, it wasn't coming from inside that room. It was knocking on my bedroom door. I froze instantly. My eyes locked onto the doorknob. Nobody spoke. No footsteps. No breathing. Just the door in front of me. Then my phone lit up. Ryan sent me a message. "Ethan, are you standing outside my room right now?" Before I could even reply, I heard knocking coming from Ryan's door. Knock, knock, knock. The next morning, neither Ryan nor I had really slept at all. He sat at the kitchen table with dark circles under his eyes, holding a cup of coffee without even drinking it. I asked him what he had heard the night before. Ryan said, "At first, I thought you were messing with me." I asked, "Then what happened?" He stared at the ceiling for a few seconds before speaking quietly. "I heard your voice." I forced out a nervous laugh because I thought he was joking, but his face didn't look like he was joking at all. He said that after the knocking outside his room stopped, someone stood outside his door and called his name. The voice was very soft, almost like a whisper. "Ryan." He thought it was me, so he was about to open the door. But then he remembered I had just texted him saying I was still inside my room, so he didn't open it. He stayed frozen on his bed, and then the voice called again. "Ryan, open the door." Ryan said the voice sounded exactly like mine. Not just similar, exactly the same. The way I pronounced his name, the way I stretched out the word Ryan whenever I teased him. It sounded so identical that it gave him chills. After hearing that, I went completely silent, because the night before, I had heard knocking outside my own room too, but I never heard anyone speaking. That day, we decided to check the room at the end of the hallway. Even though Mr. Collins told us not to use it, after everything that had happened, neither of us wanted to pretend things were normal anymore. The room was locked with an old padlock. Ryan found a spare set of keys inside a kitchen drawer. Somehow, one of them fit the room perfectly. The moment the door opened, the smell of dust and damp would rush out. Inside, there wasn't anything obviously terrifying. Just a few cardboard boxes, an old standing cabinet, several picture frames turned face down against the wall, and a wooden chair placed right in the middle of the room. I stared at that chair for a long time, because the night before, we had both heard the sound of a chair being dragged. Ryan pulled out his phone and started recording while joking around. "If there's actually a ghost in here, please show yourself on camera. My YouTube channel needs the money." I didn't laugh. I couldn't shake the feeling that this room wasn't really a storage room. It felt more like a room that had been abandoned halfway through something. There were old nail marks all over the walls, like dozens of photos had once been hanging there. In the middle of the floor was a long scratch mark exactly where the chair was sitting. Ryan crouched down to look at it and said, "This chair's been dragged back and forth a lot." I asked, "Dragged by who?" He didn't answer. While searching through the boxes, I found a small metal tin. Inside were several old photographs. Family photos. An older woman, a young blonde girl, and a little boy around 8 or 9 years old. Written on the back of one photo were the words, "Evelyn Thomas, 1998. I don't know why, but looking at the boy in those photos made me uncomfortable. Not because he looked creepy, but because in every single picture, he wasn't looking at the camera. He was always staring slightly off to the side, as if someone else was standing beside the photographer. That night, Ryan wanted to set up a camera in the hallway to record everything. I hated the idea, but I agreed anyway. We placed a small camera facing directly toward the storage room door. After that, both of us dragged chairs into the living room downstairs and tried to stay awake as long as possible. Around 1:40 a.m., I accidentally fell asleep. I woke up when I heard Ryan mutter a quiet curse under his breath. He was staring at the laptop screen. I asked, "What is it?" He pointed at the camera feed. The storage room door was open, but I clearly remembered locking it. On the screen, the hallway was dark. The door stood slightly open, just enough for a hand to fit through. Inside the room was complete darkness. Then the chair appeared. Nobody was pulling it. No hands. No person. And yet the chair slowly slid out of the room. Scrape, scrape, scrape. That sound echoed from upstairs at the exact same time it appeared on the camera. Ryan and I sat there completely frozen. The chair stopped in the middle of the hallway, directly facing the camera. Then came knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Not on a door, on the wooden chair itself. Ryan whispered. "Ethan, look behind the chair." I squinted into the darkness. Behind the chair, someone was standing there. Very short, about the size of a child. Its head tilted to one side, and it was staring directly into the camera. I don't remember exactly how I reacted at that moment. Maybe I screamed, or maybe Ryan did. I only remember both of us jumping to our feet at the same time, knocking over the coffee cup on the table. The camera feed on the screen suddenly jerked violently. The image glitched for a few seconds, and when it returned to normal, the hallway was empty. The storage room door was shut. The chair was gone too. Ryan immediately ran upstairs. I grabbed his arm. "Don't be stupid." He shoved me away. "I need to get the camera." We caught it on video. I didn't want to go upstairs, but I couldn't let him go alone either. By the time we reached the second floor, the hallway felt far colder than usual. Not normal cold, wet, freezing cold, like standing in front of an open freezer. The storage room door was closed. The padlock was still hanging outside, but the chair was no longer inside the room. I looked around the hallway. Nothing. Ryan checked the camera. It was still recording. But when he replayed the footage, the entire part where the chair slid out was gone. The file jumped directly from 1:58 a.m. to 2:17 a.m. Ryan's face went pale. "That's impossible." Then suddenly, my phone started ringing from inside my bedroom. I walked into the room and picked it up. Unknown number. I still don't understand why I answered it. Maybe because by then, my brain wasn't functioning properly anymore. The line stayed silent for a few seconds. Then a child's voice spoke. Very soft, very dry. "Ethan." I froze. The voice wasn't speaking English. It called my name in Vietnamese. Ryan stood beside me, completely pale. "Who is that?" I turned on speakerphone. The child's voice came again. "Ethan, your friend opened the door." At that exact moment, Ryan's bedroom door across the hallway slowly creaked open. There was no wind. Nobody touched it. It simply opened, very slowly. Ryan rushed toward it to slam it shut, but I grabbed him and pulled him back toward the stairs. From inside Ryan's room, we heard the sound again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Ryan looked like he was about to cry. He kept muttering. I didn't open it. I swear I didn't open it. But then I remembered the first night. Ryan had almost opened the door when he heard my voice calling him. Maybe he actually had opened it. Maybe he just didn't remember. Or maybe whatever was inside only needed him to want to open it. We left the house that same night. We didn't take anything except our phones, wallets, and jackets. We rented a motel room near campus and called Mr. Collins the next morning. When I mentioned the room at the end of the hallway, he stayed silent for a very long time. Then he asked, "Did you boys open that room?" I said yes. He let out a long, slow breath. Then he told us that his sister used to live in that house with her son, Thomas. The boy disappeared in 1998. They never found his body. Afterward, the mother almost completely lost her mind. She kept insisting that Thomas was still sitting inside that room, on the wooden chair, waiting for someone to call his name. I asked, "Then why would you still rent out the house?" He didn't answer. He only said, "I locked that room for a reason." Ryan moved away the following week. He returned home earlier than planned. Before leaving, he sent me one last image recovered from the hallway camera. Somehow the video file was gone, but the thumbnail image was still saved on his laptop. In the picture was the second floor hallway. The wooden chair sat directly in the middle of the corridor. A little boy was sitting on the chair with his back facing the camera. But in the left corner of the image, right outside my bedroom door, someone else was standing there. That figure was wearing my gray hoodie. The body shape looked exactly like mine. Its face was turned toward the camera, but the face itself was completely black. No eyes, no mouth, just darkness. I never went back to that house again. But about a year later, Ryan sent me a very strange message. He said, "Ethan, last night I heard a chair dragging across my room." I asked him where he was. He replied, "Seattle." Then he sent one more message, and someone just knocked 3 times on my door. Part 2. The Thing Outside Room 214. I used to work the night shift at a small motel in Colorado Springs for almost a year. Even now, whenever I think about that place, I still get this deeply unsettling feeling. Not exactly fear, more like there's something inside my head that doesn't want to remember it, but can't forget it either. My name is Ethan. At the time, I was 23 years old. I had dropped out of college and moved to Colorado to live with my cousin Mason. He worked maintenance at an old motel near the interstate, the kind of place where truck drivers and travelers stop just to sleep for the night. The place was called Pine Creek Motel. During the daytime, it looked completely normal. 2 rows of rooms stretched out in an L shape, a red neon sign flickering on and off, and only a few old pickup trucks sitting in the parking lot. But at night, it felt different. It's hard to explain. After around 2 a.m., the entire place became so quiet that you could start hearing the faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. Mason got me a job working the front desk night shift. The work was easy enough, mostly just sitting behind the desk watching security cameras, checking in late guests, and occasionally bringing towels or bottled water to rooms. On my very first night working there, Mason warned me about something strange. He said, "If room 214 calls the front desk, don't answer." At first, I thought he was joking. I asked, "Why?" Mason stayed quiet for a few seconds before saying, "Because nobody's staying in that room." I laughed. It's probably just a broken phone line. But Mason didn't laugh. He looked at me very seriously and added, "I'm serious, Ethan. Don't answer it." At the time, I assumed the motel was old and the phone wiring was messed up. Honestly, room 214 felt strange from the beginning. It sat at the very end of the second floor hallway, right in the motel's biggest camera blind spot. The light outside the room was always dimmer than the others. And the thing I noticed most was that even when the motel was nearly full on weekends, room 214 was never rented out. Nobody stayed there. Nobody cleaned it. The door was always locked. One time I asked the manager, a woman named Denise, "Why doesn't anyone rent room 214? She was checking paperwork at the desk when she suddenly paused for a second. Then she simply answered, "It's under renovation." But during the nearly 2 months I worked there, I never once saw anybody fixing anything. About 3 weeks after I started working there, the first thing happened. That night, there was a heavy storm outside. Around 3 a.m., I was sitting behind the desk eating instant noodles when the front desk phone rang. The screen read, "Room 214. I remember my heart immediately dropping because I instantly remembered what Mason had told me. The phone kept ringing. Ring, ring, ring. I looked up at the check-in board. Room 214 was still vacant. Nobody was staying there. I sat staring at the phone for almost a full minute. Eventually, I answered it anyway. I said, "Front desk speaking." Nobody answered. There was only a faint static noise, like the person on the other end was very far away. I asked again, "Hello." A few seconds later, I heard something. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. Very soft, coming directly through the phone. I remember my hand suddenly going ice cold. I asked, "Who is this?" No response. But right after that, I heard something dragging slowly across carpet. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Then the call abruptly disconnected. I sat there staring at the phone for several seconds. For some reason, I suddenly had a terrible feeling, like I had just done something I wasn't supposed to do. I pulled up the second floor security camera feed. The hallway was completely empty. Dim yellow lights. Nobody there. But the door to room 214 was slightly open. I was absolutely certain it had been completely shut before. I stared at the crack in the doorway. My heart started pounding. Then something moved past the opening. It didn't step outside. It just passed by the doorway very quickly. At that exact moment, the front desk phone rang again. This time, the screen read, "Unknown." I genuinely didn't want to answer anymore. But the sound of that ringing, echoing through the empty motel was unbearable. Eventually, I picked it up, and the moment I pressed the receiver to my ear, a rough male voice whispered, "It's standing behind you." I spun around immediately. The area behind the front desk was completely empty. Nobody was there. But when I turned back toward the camera monitors, the door to room 214 was now wide open. Inside was total darkness. I remember my entire body going cold. The kind of cold that crawls up your spine and completely takes over your body. I grabbed the radio and called security. "Logan? You there?" No response. I called again. Still silence. The strange thing was that Logan never turned off his radio. He was an older security guard, grumpy as hell, but extremely serious about his job. That was when I started genuinely panicking. Outside, the rain was still pouring heavily. The sound of water hammering against the metal roof was deafening. The entire motel felt completely lifeless except for the hum of the air conditioning and the storm outside. Then the front desk phone rang again. This time, I refused to answer, but it wouldn't stop. Ring, ring, ring. The ringing dragged on so long that I finally snapped. I picked up the phone and shouted, "Who the hell is this?" For the first few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then I heard breathing, very close, like someone was standing directly against the receiver on the other end. Then a woman's voice spoke, very softly. "Ethan." I remember the blood in my body turning to ice, because the voice sounded exactly like Claire. Claire was my ex-girlfriend. We had broken up almost a year earlier, and she was living all the way in Arizona. Before I could say anything, the voice whispered again, "You left me out there." Then the line exploded into static. The call disconnected. I stood frozen behind the desk. I've never told anyone this because it sounds insane, but that voice really was Claire's. Not similar. Except, at that exact moment, the second floor hallway cameras suddenly started glitching violently. The monitors flickered nonstop. Then for one brief moment, I saw someone standing outside room 214. Very tall, wearing a long black coat, head hanging low, completely motionless. I don't know how long I stared at that thing. Maybe a few seconds, maybe longer, then slowly lifted its head. Very slowly. The camera feed distorted harder the moment its face turned toward the screen. I couldn't make out its features. I only saw darkness. No eyes. No mouth. Like the camera itself couldn't capture its face. Then the monitor suddenly went black. Every second floor camera lost signal at the exact same time. I immediately stood up and rushed to lock the front desk door. But right then, I heard the elevator chime. Ding. I turned toward it. The elevator doors slowly slid open. Nobody was inside, but the floor of the elevator was completely soaked, like someone had been standing there dripping wet from the rain. I remember staring at the floor when I noticed footprints. Vet footprints. A trail of them leading out of the elevator, straight toward the front desk. And the thing that made my stomach drop was, there was only one footprint each time. Like whatever was walking only had one leg. Clop. Clop, clop. The sound echoed at the exact same moment a new wet print appeared on the floor. But I couldn't see anyone there. I started backing away. The footprints kept moving closer, closer, and closer. Then they stopped directly in front of the front desk. Total silence. I stood completely frozen, too terrified to even breathe loudly. A few seconds later, the desk phone in front of me lit up by itself. There was no incoming call. But on the screen, there was a single message. Look up. I don't know why I looked up at that moment. Maybe because I was panicking, or maybe because my mind wasn't functioning normally anymore. But I looked up anyway, and I saw it, standing directly on the other side of the front desk. Someone was there, very tall, unnaturally tall. Its head almost touched the ceiling. Its entire body was soaking wet. Water dripped onto the floor beneath it. I couldn't clearly see its face, not because it was dark, but because its face looked blurred, like my eyes physically couldn't focus on it. But I remember its posture perfectly, its head tilted to one side, its arms hanging limply at its sides, completely motionless. I don't know how long I stood there frozen. Then it moved, very slowly, its head tilted a little further, and then it started walking around the front desk. Clop, clop, clop. The sound of dragging footsteps echoed across the tile floor. I instinctively backed away. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Then every light in the lobby flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time the lights went out and came back on, that thing was standing closer. I could barely breathe anymore. By then, it was only a few feet away from me. Then suddenly, the radio on the desk exploded with static. Logan's voice shouted through it, "Ethan, don't look at it." At that exact moment, every light went out completely. The entire lobby fell into total darkness. I heard water dripping somewhere nearby, then the sound of something dragging its foot, right beside me. I remember almost losing my mind at that point. I bolted out from behind the desk, slammed into the glass door, then ran straight outside into the rain. I just kept running, without looking back. Not until I spotted Logan smoking near the parking area behind the motel. The moment he saw me, His face immediately went pale. He asked, "You saw it, didn't you?" I practically screamed, "What the hell is that thing?" Logan didn't answer right away. He just stared back toward the motel, his face completely drained of color. Then he said, "Mason should have explained it better." That night, Logan told me what had happened in room 214 about 7 years earlier. A man named Daniel had rented the room alone for 3 days. On the final night, the guests in the neighboring room called the front desk because they kept hearing someone pacing back and forth in the hallway for hours. When Logan went upstairs to check, the door to room 214 was open. Daniel was standing in the middle of the room, soaking wet, like he had just come in from heavy rain. But outside that night, there hadn't been any rain at all. Logan said the most terrifying part was that Daniel didn't react when Logan called his name. He just stood there, head tilted to one side, staring into the corner of the bathroom, then slowly said, "It's standing behind you." The next morning, Daniel disappeared. He left behind no belongings, never checked out. Nobody ever found him again. After that night, I quit the job immediately. I never returned to Pine Creek Motel. But about 3 months later, Mason called me close to midnight. His voice sounded strange. He asked, "Ethan, did you ever see its face?" I said no. Mason stayed silent for a few seconds before quietly saying, "Last night, the cameras recorded something." I asked, "What?" I could hear him swallow nervously. Then he answered, "It was standing outside room 214. A few seconds of silence. And this time it had your face." After the Pine Creek Motel incident, I barely slept properly for months. I wish I were exaggerating to make the story sound scarier, but honestly, after that night, something inside my head permanently changed. It's like once you've seen something that shouldn't exist, you can never go back to being the same person you were before. I quit the motel the following week. Mason left his job there not long after that too. He never explained why, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with room 214. For the first few months, I tried to forget everything. I moved to Denver and stayed with an old friend named Caleb. He worked IT for a cybersecurity company, and I managed to get a night security job at a luxury apartment tower near downtown. I chose the night shift because by then, I had developed chronic insomnia. Nights felt easier for me than daytime. The building was called Westline Tower, 26 floors, very new, very modern, completely different from Pine Creek Motel. Security cameras everywhere. Lights on July 24th. Elevators operated with key cards. No dark hallways or abandoned rooms. And maybe that's exactly why what happened afterward felt so horrifying. Everything was too normal. My job, there was simple. Sit at the front desk from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m., monitor cameras, receive late-night deliveries for residents, and occasionally help people when their elevator key cards malfunctioned. The night shift, there was unbelievably quiet. After around 1 a.m., almost nobody came in or out anymore. I got used to that routine very quickly, until about the 13th night. It was around 2:26 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had just looked at the clock before getting up to make coffee. One of the elevator cameras suddenly glitched. Not a full signal loss. The image just flickered slightly a few times. I assumed the camera was malfunctioning, so I zoomed in on the feed. And that's when I saw someone inside the elevator. A man, very tall, wearing a long black coat, standing with his back facing the camera, completely motionless. The strange thing was that the elevator itself wasn't moving. It was sitting still on the 19th floor. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before checking the resident access logs. Nobody had used a key card to access the 19th floor for nearly an hour. I figure it was probably some drunk resident passed out inside the elevator. But then I noticed something strange. The man wasn't moving at all, not shifting posture, not tilting his head, not even the slightest movement. I kept staring at the screen for almost a full minute. Then the elevator started descending. 19, 18, 17, the man still didn't move. A feeling of discomfort started creeping into me. For some reason, the way he stood reminded me of the thing from the motel. That unnatural stillness. Something about it felt wrong. The elevator kept descending. 16, 15, 14. Then the camera feed violently flickered. And for one brief moment, the man was no longer facing away. He was staring directly into the camera. I still remember that freezing sensation crawling up my spine because I never saw him turn around. One frame earlier, his back was facing the camera. The next frame, he was staring straight at the screen. I couldn't make out his face, only darkness, like the camera couldn't record his features. Then the image returned to normal. He was facing away again. I sat there frozen for several seconds. The elevator continued downward. 13, 12, 11. Then it stopped on the 8th floor. The doors opened. Nobody stepped in. Nobody stepped out. But the man inside the elevator was gone. I remember my heart pounding so hard it physically hurt. I rewound the footage. There was no moment where he walked out of the elevator. None. He just disappeared. At that exact moment, the front desk phone rang. The screen displayed, Unit 1908. I answered it. A trembling woman's voice came through the line. "Excuse me, is someone still down in the lobby?" I replied, "Yes, I'm here." She stayed quiet for a few seconds before asking, "Can you check the cameras on the 19th floor for me?" I asked, "What's going on?" Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Someone's been standing outside my apartment door for almost 10 minutes. I immediately pulled up the cameras for the 19th floor. The hallway was completely empty. The lights were normal. Nobody was there. I told the woman, "I don't see anyone." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "But the knocking is still happening." And at that exact moment, I heard it too. Very faint. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks echoed through the phone. I remember my hand instantly going cold. I asked, "Did you open the door?" She answered almost immediately, "No." Then a few seconds later, she added, "But my peephole camera doesn't see anyone out there." I looked back up at the 19th floor cameras again. Still nobody there. But then, the hallway lights on the 19th floor flickered slightly. Once, twice, 3 times. And in the instant the lights came back on, someone was standing at the end of the hallway. Very tall, wearing a black coat, head hanging low. My heart nearly stopped. I zoomed in on the camera feed, but the image immediately began glitching violently. The woman on the phone started crying. "It's knocking again. Knock, knock, knock." This time, the knocking was louder. Then I heard her doorknob starting to shake on the other end of the line. Violently. Bang, bang, bang. I jumped out of my chair. "Did you lock the door?" She practically screamed. "It's trying to open it." Then the call abruptly disconnected. I immediately radioed the upstairs security guard. No response. I called again. Still silence. The strange thing was that every camera on the 19th floor started glitching at the exact same time. The monitors flickered nonstop. Then suddenly, they all went black. Only the elevator camera was still working. And that man had returned. He was standing inside the elevator, facing the camera, completely motionless. I still don't know why I did something that stupid. Maybe because the woman genuinely sounded terrified. Or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that there was a normal explanation for everything. But in the end, I grabbed the master key and went up to the 19th floor. The elevator was completely empty, but the floor was freezing cold, unnaturally cold. That damp kind of cold, like someone had been standing there for a very long time. When the doors opened on the 19th floor, the hallway was terrifyingly silent. The knocking had stopped. I walked down the hallway toward apartment 1908. The door was still locked. I knocked gently. "Mom?" "Front desk." No response. I called out again. Still silence. Then behind me, I heard footsteps. Clop, clop, clop. Very slow, coming from the end of the hallway. I spun around immediately. Nobody there, but the hallway lights started flickering. And for one brief instant, I saw him standing much closer than before. I stood frozen in the middle of the hallway. The lights kept flickering. Every time the lights went out and came back on, that thing was standing closer. There were no running footsteps, no visible movement. The distance between us was simply disappearing. I remember my mind going completely numb. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, but my legs refused to move. Then every hallway light suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the entire 19th floor. I heard breathing, very close, right in front of me. I barely even dared to breathe. Then the lights came back on. That thing was standing less than 6 feet away from me. I have never seen anything so horribly wrong in my life. Its body was too long. Its arms hung almost down to its knees. Its head tilted sideways like its neck had been broken. And its face was still nothing but pure darkness. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. But I knew it was staring at me. At that exact moment, the door to apartment 1908 suddenly flew open. A young woman burst out sobbing uncontrollably, and the thing vanished. It didn't run. It didn't dissolve into smoke. It simply wasn't there anymore. The girl grabbed onto me so tightly she was shaking violently. Her name was Olivia, early 20s. She kept repeating. It stood outside my door for almost half an hour. I asked, "Did you see its face?" Olivia immediately shook her head, her face completely pale. No, but I knew it was looking at me. I escorted her downstairs to the lobby. On the way down, Olivia told me she first started hearing the knocking around 2 a.m. At first it was soft, then it kept getting louder. The thing that terrified her most was that the peephole camera outside her door never showed anyone there. The hallway was completely empty, but the knocking kept coming from directly outside her apartment. When we reached the lobby, I reopened the 19th floor cameras. Everything was normal again. No glitches, no man in the black coat. But when I rewound the footage, I saw something that chilled me more than anything else that night. At approximately 2:31 a.m., the camera showed me stepping out of the elevator on the 19th floor, walking down the hallway, stopping outside apartment 1908. But behind me, someone else stepped out of the elevator too, very tall, wearing a black coat, following me the entire way down the hallway. And the most horrifying part was, during all of that time, I had absolutely no idea something was standing right behind me. I quit my job at Westline Tower about a week later. I tried to forget everything, just like I had after Pine Creek Motel. But nearly 2 months later, Olivia called me close to midnight. Her voice was very quiet, very shaky. She asked, "Ethan, do you still have the footage from the 19th floor?" I told her yes. Then I asked, "What happened?" Olivia stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she started crying. "Tonight, I saw it on my door camera." I asked, "At your old apartment?" She replied, "No." A few seconds of silence. "I moved to Chicago.